Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. We begin in the Northwest Territories, where 98% of young people in care there are Indigenous. Well, the territorial government says overrepresentation is due to a history of colonization. One mother fighting the system says it's more than that, and the system itself is broken. Our reporter Charlotte Mort-Jacobs brings us that story.
This Quechua mother of four loves cooking country foods for her family. Her kids also enjoy it, a sweet reprieve from food and foster care. We can't name anyone because of privacy reasons, but their story echoes the struggles other Indigenous families face when navigating the child welfare system. The mother has been dealing with Child and Family Services since she moved from the remote community of N.W.T to Yellowknife.
To have our children have better education level, more activities, but we struggled in our relationship. So after my daughter was born, we had our ups and downs. We both started relapsing, and our children got apprehended in January 2022.
Still, they never expected their kids could be at risk of mistreatment in foster care.
So the medical reports that I got from February 12th, and this was the multiple bruises that I got from another doctor on July.
The mother says twice she's brought her toddler to the hospital after discovering bruises on him after he'd been in foster care, according to a doctor's note from the child's doctor dated February 2022. Both parents speak their traditional language and struggle with English, especially when it comes to the legal system.
It's stressful, you know, when you don't understand the system. There's some words they say that we don't understand, you know, like there's no advocate. They're not going to explain it to us.
She has an advocate now, but says she's often pressured to sign documents without anyone representing her. This spring, the territorial government laid out proposed amendments to the Child and Family Services Act. It outlines that supports like counseling and parenting programs should be prioritized over apprehension, insofar as doing so is in the child's best interest. And the report includes 19 recommendations, some of which are specific to changes in the Child and Family Services Act. In addition to the reassessment of its proposed changes based on feedback from the public, the department will also be analyzing the recommendations made by the Standing Committee. A formal response to this report will be tabled in-house during the upcoming session of the Legislative Assembly. The daughters also want change.
Can you go out and see friends? Are you guys allowed? No friends?
But the other kids have friends.
Do you get lonely at all? What do you do when you get lonely?
Nothing. Because it's a very boring house.
And just wants to be with her family.
I like it when I see them because we eat breakfast and we play. We go outside, we take walks, we go to the park.
For the mother, she feels it's her word against the system, and the system wins every time.
I want to keep fighting for my children. I love my children and I want them home. But because of the system, and what I was told was that a judge will not believe me because they have an affidavit in a commissioner of oath to sign this affidavit that they say that whatever they're saying is true. And I have no commissioner of oath. I don't have an affidavit. All I have.
Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Well, with winter fast approaching, the housing crisis in British Columbia is becoming a major concern. In the community of Terrace, advocates set up a protest encampment calling for the city to designate an area for the homeless population. APTN's Lee Wilson has that story.
Last week, outreach workers and advocates raised awareness for those struggling with homelessness by setting up tents and spending the night at Terrace's City Hall. It was a response to a recent city council meeting where some community members spoke out against a potential shelter. William Morrison is a frontline worker for the Nisga'a Nation. He once lived in the streets here. He says people need to have more compassion for those facing hard times.
I haven't been in a place where you had to sleep on the streets. If you haven't lost somebody, if you don't have somebody out here, it's not your problem. When in fact, it is, because we're all one. We're human beings.
Taria Roberge is an outreach worker from nonprofit Commodity Friendship Society. She provides support for those struggling with homelessness. Roberge says the most vulnerable here are facing a housing crisis, along with a lingering pandemic and a deadly opioid crisis.
A housing crisis that is destroying families, an opioid crisis that is destroying families and killing people, and a community that just won't get on board with solutions. So a lot of people are suffering on so many points coming at them, attacking them.
Last month, Statistics Canada data showed the province of BC had Canada's most unaffordable housing, with nearly a quarter of homes costing more than 30% of income. Terrace has a population of nearly 12,000 and a 2002 homeless count of 84. Robert says one of the things the city of Terrace can do is help designate an area for homeless to set up tents.
Winter is coming. There is not enough housing. There is not enough shelter spaces. Our numbers are really high. People are looking to just set up a tent and create a home base, somewhere where they can lay their head at night and feel safe and not be moved along by a bylaw officer. And that's not against the bylaw officers. They're doing their job. But it's up to the city to designate an area for our individuals.
We reached out to Terrace Mayor and Council for a comment, but did not receive a response before airtime. An election was held this weekend. Robert says spending the night last week in a tent at City Hall triggered her memories of once being homeless. She says that terrible feeling for one night makes her fight harder for change for those experiencing homelessness right now.
It made me realize that I'm pretty damn privileged to have those just simply as memories and not living it right now. And it made me want to push harder. It made me want to help people more because they don't deserve to feel that way. That was only one night for me. And I can't imagine what people are feeling right now.
Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Terrace.
We want to hear how your community is helping the most vulnerable. Here's how to continue the conversation. You can send your emails to news@aptn.ca or leave a comment on our website. That's aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. You can follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. Federal Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino was in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan today. Calling it a historic moment, the minister signed a policing agreement with the Prince Albert Grand Council and the province of Saskatchewan. Our Leanne Sanders was at the ceremony and she joins us now. Leanne, good to see you. Can you tell us a bit about this agreement?
Today they were not long on specifics, but basically what it does is it sets up a framework for these three groups to come to an agreement on what policing in the community should look like. There were no dollar figures attached today, but just an understanding that they are going to work together to come up with ideas and solutions.
I guess then no specifics, no money attached. What is the historical significance of this?
Well, the minister, Marco Mendicino, he acknowledged today that basically there's been mistrust and First Nations people have not been happy with the relationship with RCMP and with Canada, ever since the days of the residential school system. And there was a promise that predated the treaties that there would be a red coat in every community, and that hasn't happened. So now the communities are saying they want action. sooner rather than later.
Like you say, awful history here, one that isn't built on trust for a century plus. Why has it taken so long for Canada to get to this point here?
I think there was just a lack of resources for one, but just an acknowledgement today that they should have been doing something sooner. And he had no really great answer for that question, but just that they are going to plan on working together to make it happen sooner.
Any idea what the next steps are for this process?
They're talking about doing some information gathering, I guess. There is some sense of urgency given what happened in the community of James Smith. So this agreement covers all of the communities. There's some 12 First Nations, 28 member communities in Prince Albert Grand Council that this will cover. No word on the other Grand Councils or councils that are in place in other areas of Saskatchewan, but it's something that the communities say is needed everywhere. There's urgency with the growing opioid addictions, the gang activities that are coming into play on the reserves. And what some would like to see is just a total ban on drugs and alcohol in these communities. But again, there was some mention that security forces that they do have in place in some communities, they can't stop what's going on at this point. So this is definitely needed.
Leanne, we'll have to leave it there, but appreciate you taking some time.
Sounds good. Thank you.
A recent article published by CBC questions Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond's Indigenous heritage. After it was published, several First Nations leaders in Saskatchewan have released statements of support for Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond, but not everyone agrees. A recent story by the CBC is the latest, questioning the heritage of a high-profile person. Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond is a lawyer, former justice, and advocate for Indigenous rights, although the CBC story raises doubt about if she is Cree. She is claimed by Muskeg Lake Cree Nation in Saskatchewan. They released this statement of support saying, quote, "As chief of Muskeg Lake Cree Nation, I can confirm that Mary Ellen is a member of Muskeg Lake Cree Nation and has been for nearly 30 years. Saskatoon Tribal Council Chief Mark Arcand released this statement of support, saying, quote, "As Tribal Chief of Saskatoon Tribal Council, I recently stated that First Nations alone must decide these matters. If outsiders act as arbitrators of who belongs or is Indigenous, it will remain colonial, oppressive, and culturally unsafe for our peoples to determine our identity." And FSIN released a statement of support from Vice Chief Ali Bear. The Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations supports our First Nations governments and their inherent right to determine their membership and citizenship according to their customs, practices, and traditions. I stand with Muskeg Lake Cree Nation and its member, Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond. But NDP MLA Betty Nippy Albright, who's a member of one of the Saskatoon Tribal Council's bands, says the statements of support by First Nations leaders in Saskatchewan doesn't sit well with her.
Actually, when I read the, especially STC tribal chief sending out a statement in support, I'm from Kiniston Saulteaux Nation, and Kiniston is part of those 7 member bands. So I immediately called my chief and I said, "Are you all on board with supporting this statement that's come out?" And I was told that came from the tribal chief himself. It didn't come from all the 7 member bands.
Nippy Albright says the First Nations leaders don't speak for her and that the issue isn't about band membership, that any First Nation can give membership to anyone.
When leaders are coming out and supporting and making a blanket support, what does that say? Nobody is disputing membership. What we're asking for is when somebody is claiming treaty status and has been claiming treaty status for years, we're simply saying, prove it.
APTN News reached out to Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond but did not receive a response. Millions of dollars in funding has been announced for a 24/7 safe space in Winnipeg. Details after the break. Welcome back. A police oversight body has wrapped up its investigation into members of Thunder Bay's police service, and it recommends moving ahead with charges under the Police Services Act against the force's currently suspended police chief. In a press release, the Ontario Civilian Police Commission says it finds allegations of discreditable conduct and deceit against Sylvie Hoth to be substantiated. A hearing on those charges against the police chief is scheduled for February of 2023. The commission also announced allegations of misconduct against suspended Deputy Police Chief Ryan Hughes to be unsubstantiated. Press release also says the term of the Police Services Board Administrator, Malcolm Mercer, has been extended until the end of March of next year. A bill that aims to monitor the federal government's progress on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action began being studied by a parliamentary committee this morning. National Chief Roseanne Archibald told the House's Indigenous and Northern Affairs Committee that C-29 doesn't go far enough in its current form. The bill would create a National Council for Reconciliation comprised of 9 to 13 members. The Assembly of First Nations, Métis National Council, and Inuit Tapiriit Kaunitami would each be able to nominate one member. But Archibald suggested amending the legislation so that the AFN nominates 3 members and MNC and ITK 2 each.
Given the history of these institutions on our people, it's really of primary importance that the NCR Board of Directors be truly independent of government and also be reflective of the overwhelming impact that these institutions had on First Nations people.
Crisis hotlines for those fleeing gender-based violence in the Yukon received a major boost in funding. The federal government is investing $500,000 over 4 years in crisis hotlines across the territory. According to officials, Yukon experiences 3 times the national average rate of gender-based violence. The new funding comes from a $55 million investment to support the capacity of Indigenous women and gender-diverse organizations that provide violence prevention services. Another $400,000 will also be provided to the Yukon Aboriginal Women's Council in prevention services and supports.
We know that there's still a long way to go, but we are moving in the right direction. Our agreement with Yukon and the new funding in support of the Yukon Aboriginal Women's Council brings us one step closer to building a safer and more equal Canada for all.
And the federal government has announced over $6 million in funding to support a safe space for women and the gender diverse community in Winnipeg. $6.9 million will go towards Velma's House, operated by Kanakanijic. According to their press release, Velma's House is Winnipeg's only Indigenous-led 24/7 safe space. The feds are also announced $1.5 million for Indigenous women's organizations in Manitoba. Bianca Moore is a support worker and survivor of violence. She says the investment will allow Velma's House to expand its capacity to provide culturally appropriate life-saving shelter.
A larger supported Velma's House is critical as every single day women in our community are at risk. Velma's House will now be able to open its doors to more women and provide more programming on site.
An Anishinaabe war hero is getting his own stamp. That story is still to come after the break. Welcome back. Time now to take a look at our photo of the day. And it's almost that time of year again. Ghosts, ghouls, princesses, and robots will soon be seeking sugary treats. Kelsey Weber sent us this picture of little Adeline with Coco. Not sure which pup is Coco, but they are gearing up for Halloween. If you have a great Halloween photo, send it by email to share@aptn.ca, and you might be our next photo of the day. Starting on the East Coast, 21 with showers for Halifax, cloudy and 16 for St. John's. +1 and cloudy in Kuujjuaq, showers and 4 in Nain. 11 with rain in Montreal, 7 and showers for Val-d'Or. 7 with snow in Sault Ste. Marie, showers and 7 for North Bay. 6 in Thunder Bay, +2 in Sioux Lookout. In northern Manitoba, +2 and sunny in God's Lake, 6 under the sun for Norway House. 2 is the high in Winnipeg, sunny and 10 for Dauphin. 15 under the sun for Regina, 18 and sunny in Saskatoon. 18 for Meadow Lake, 11 for Stony Rapids. In northern Alberta, 16 with showers for Fort McMurray, 18 in Grand Prairie. 19 in Edmonton, 21 in Lethbridge. Showers and 17 for Vancouver, smoky and 18 for Kamloops. 16 in Prince George and Smithers. 0 in Old Crow, rain, and 8 for Whitehorse. 9 in Yellowknife, 7 for Norman Wells. -3 with snow in Sax Harbor, +3 in snow in Pawlatuck. +2 with snow for Chesterfield, 3 in Whale Cove and Arviette. -12 in Resolute, 10 below with snow in Arctic Bay. Canada Post today has unveiled a new stamp honoring one of Canada's most decorated Indigenous war veterans. Sergeant Tommy Prince was from the Broken Head Ojibwe Nation. For his service in the Second World War and the Korean War, he was awarded 11 medals, including the Military Medal and the Silver Star. Prince was also an advocate for the abolition of the Indian Act. The stamps are currently available for pre-order and will be available for purchase at Canada Post locations on October 28th. Broken Head Chief Gordon Bluesky says it's important to keep Prince's story alive.
Sergeant Tommy enlisted at a time where he wasn't forced to enlist. He wasn't forced to be a part of the military action that was being taken overseas. He joined voluntarily, as many of our Aboriginal soldiers did then and still do today. I can only imagine what a person like Sergeant Tommy had to endure, carrying the traumatic, the PTSD that he already had from attending residential school.
Great looking stamp and a nice honor. That's all the time we have for your news for this Monday. For more on anything you've seen here and much more, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you back here tomorrow.